Welcome to Building Fortunes Radio. Make sure you check us out at buildingfortunesradio.com. Along with our marketing partners, we're here to help our PM Marketing Network Lead customers build their businesses and make the world a better place. At Building Fortunes, we know how much your business means to you and the people important to you. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world. Now on to our show with your host, Peter Mingles.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingles here. You're listening to us on Building Fortunes Radio. It's www.buildingfortunesradio.com. For those people that might be unfamiliar with my voice, my name is Peter Mingles. We run this whole thing. Started this back towards the tail end of 2012, beginning part of 2013, because I wanted to have a platform to be able to talk about some of the really great things that happen in home-based businesses. Because of the type of person I am and a somewhat outspoken, that's just an understatement, I found that it was really hard to talk about some of the things that were challenging associated with this industry. And one of the reasons why we do this specific radio show is because I was doing a radio show with a gentleman. It was an anti-MLM gentleman. His name was Roger Van Vlissingen. He was a guest speaker for us one time. I called him up, and he was talking about MLM being pyramid schemes and Ponzi's and stuff like that, talking specifically about what happened with Herbalife with the FTC trials, not trials, but the ex parte, if you will, TRO, temporary restraining order. And anyway, so we were talking about those types of issues, and Scott Johnson called me up, and he said, Peter, a lot of things that are being spoken about are, the same old thing, but nobody's talking about the MLM tool scam. And I didn't really understand what he meant. I knew what I thought was the MLM tool scam because I had been associated with Amway 3 separate times. Associated meaning like the first time I think I sponsored myself. I think I kind of found a sponsor. Second time I think they found me. Third time they definitely found me. I was reverse recruited. And each time that I left specifically because of the tools, meaning I could see right through it. Everybody was making more money on tools. It was more like a cult. They were more interested in me, bringing new people into the business, recruit, get them on the books, tapes, and functions. And I just said, you know what, this obviously profits here. Who's making the profits on the tools is the questions that I was saying. I didn't necessarily know to call them tools, but I'm like, somebody's obviously making money on the books, the tapes, and these functions. Is the lifestyle that they're leading as a result of the tools, or is it Amway? And I kept asking questions about the compensation plan. I can't see how the compensation plan is going to be able to generate that lifestyle, I would say to myself, and them. And anyway, one thing led to another, and I quit 3 times because of the tool scam. So when Scott Johnson started explaining his version of the tool scam, I said, I think we're talking about the same thing. And then when he told me about his website, stoptheamwaytoolscam.wordpress.com, I said, definitely, I know what you're talking about. So we started our radio show, and as a result of that, every Saturday at this time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Central Time, we have really wonderful radio shows where we kind of update you on different and various things. Scott does a great job in research. Every once in a while we have a guest speaker. So tonight we have a repeat guest speaker, and Scott's going to introduce her. And, this is our second time having her here. I'm a bigger fan, obviously, the second time around, especially with some of the things we were talking about on the pre-show. She's going to be a little bit more comfortable, I guess, kind of like letting her hair down and having some conversations with us. And she can come back anytime she wants to because she's a great gal and been through some wonderful experiences as far as, life in general, but also how to handle some of the negative situations that happened not only in her Amway business, but also in her life in general. So, Scott Johnson, I'll let you introduce yourself first, and then our wonderful guest next.
Okay, Peter, thank you for having the show again. I appreciate it. We're almost up to 5 years now. At some point, we need to call this a body of work.
Yeah.
I'm not sure when, but I think we're getting there. Let me just kind of go over a couple of words that you said and define them, because some people have different ideas for these words. And just so we're level set here and are using the same language for the words, a Ponzi scheme is generally something, if you remember Bernie Madoff, okay, the Ponzi scheme is typically something associated with investments, typically stocks. It could be oil, but typically it's stocks. And it's where there's one operator, and that one guy gets money from other people, and then he doesn't really pay them a real profit. What he pays them is profit from new people joining. When they pay their money, then he turns that into profit for the people that joined earlier. That's a Ponzi scheme. And there's generally only one person that's aware that it's a Ponzi scheme, and that's the nature of that. Now, a multi-level marketing scam is similar to that, excuse me, but it's a little bit different too, because as the name implies, there's multiple levels, multi-level marketing, and so there's not just a single person. Typically, there's a group, and particularly in Amway, there's a group of corporate people that they know full well that they're operating an illegal pyramid, and I'll get to that in a second. And also the top-level distributors, they're fully aware that they're involved in both an illegal pyramid as well as a tool scam, RICO fraud. And so an illegal pyramid is where there's little to no retail sales outside of the organization. In other words, to real customers. It's only to the downline, or mostly to the downline. That's what an illegal pyramid is in the MLM context. And most of the people that are involved in that have no idea that they are required to have those retail sales in order to not be considered an illegal pyramid. They just don't know. It's ignorance. I don't mean that in a derogatory manner. They just don't know. And so they go along with the flow and, buy the stuff and try to get a downline. Maybe they get a downline and have them buy the stuff. But there's little to no retail sales to outside customers going on. And that's really the hallmark. And I think most MLMs fall into that category, even though there's individuals within some of those MLMs that are selling quite a bit of product. But if the FTC came in, they would look at it overall, and they would certainly clamp down on that scenario. And that's one of my, sort of disappointments, I guess, with the FTC is they go after one or two MLMs here and there, but not the entire industry, and they really should. Now, the tool scam that you mentioned, that's where the upline and Amway charge for things like meetings and books and recordings and phone apps and website access and voicemail, et cetera, and they charge their downline for these things under the guise of training and motivating them. And by the way, I don't really have a big problem with the content of those things. Not that I agree with everything, but I don't agree with, everything for any person on the planet probably. We may agree about some things and disagree about others. So it doesn't really have to be perfect content to be reasonable, in my estimation. It's really the fact that they're making a whole lot of money, some of them 5 and 10 times more from the tools than they are from the Amway business itself. Those references are on my website. You can actually, see these people claiming those things. So it's not me saying it; it's them admitting to it. Of course, it's after they get out. They wouldn't dare admit to it while they're in Amway. But that's what we call the tool scam. They don't like to admit that that's where most of their profit comes from, and that's frankly what makes it a scam. If they were upfront about that, I would say, hey, that's just the business model, and it's not really, it's not a big deal because it's in the open. If you don't like it, then you wouldn't join. If you did like it, then, you would join. But the problem is they don't tell people. So, that's really the issue. So we have a return guest that's quite exciting here. I'm glad that Krista Moss, I believe it is, how she pronounces her last name, has come back. She was here about, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago and fell ill. And I think you're better now, Krista. I didn't think of asking you about that before the show. I hope you're back to 100%. Let us know when you chime in here in a second. But we had a great show, and I'm going to turn it over to Krista. And Krista, tell us how you're doing physically, as well as, kind of give us a 3 to 5 minute overview of the first show, some of the highlights of the things we talked about for those that are tuning into this radio show and hadn't listened to the earlier one. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for letting me back on a second time. I'm excited to do this again. And yes, I'm feeling back to 100%. I appreciate that you guys are always so flexible with scheduling. Last time I was on, I just kind of gave an overview of my experience in Amway, dating my upline, kind of some of the lies that were told to me, what I went through just kind of traumatically. I was pretty young, and my upline was quite a few years older than me when we started dating, and I didn't really understand the power of your mind and psychological abuse. I don't ever think that they were like intentionally trying to abuse me, but I did go through a pretty traumatic experience that ended up shaping my early 20s, all of my 20s, between buying businesses and jobs, and pretty much everything that I did ended up being surrounding Amway and my experience while I was in Amway and outside of Amway. And so today I actually asked you guys to come back because I would just love to go further into detail about what happened to me within my relationship. I was a very strong, independent, confident woman when I was prospected and found, which is why I think my upline was interested in me, given the age difference. And I had never experienced depression or, psychological trauma. And so when it's kind of a slow process into that, people don't understand how you can get so far gone and why, I guess, it's so hard to pull yourself out of that mindset after everything happened. So I wanted to just talk about the gaslighting tactics, the brainwashing tactics that they use from the beginning of when you're first prospected into when you're really in the thick of it, how they really either take over your mind, or it seems that some people try and escape and do successfully escape.
Yeah, that sounds great. Which one would you like to start with, the gaslighting?
I actually want to start just with the beginning brainwashing tactics, just because it's not like they bombard you right away when you first meet all of these people. They're very positive. It seems like a really good opportunity. Everyone is talking it up. You like what you hear because you're hearing it for the first time when you listen to, these speakers. And what they start doing is they start really, really small with the interview process, and they start changing your mind first on how you view jobs and having a 9-to-5 job and entrepreneurship, and where the market is now, industrial age versus information age. And they start leading you down this path of believing that their route is the only way nowadays for somebody like me, someone young, to be successful or to create residual income. And they start, for me being young, they started telling me a lot of things about business and finances that I didn't know. So I was really blown away. And you start listening to these speakers, and they're telling you about these lavish lifestyles, and then they start trickling in there. When you talk to your friends and family, don't really listen to what they say, and they start not even letting you realize that they're starting to pin you against all of the people that are in your life. They do it subconsciously just by doing those little carrots every single time that they meet you. And then they put these higher ups on this pedestal, and so they're like these celebrities, and all of a sudden you want to be this celebrity, and you start saying and doing the same things that they were doing to get you involved, and that's how the start of it happens.
And I'm not sure, have you ever heard the term of boiling the frog? Is that something you're familiar with?
Yeah, where you boil him and he doesn't realize it until he's dead.
Yeah, and the story is not literally true, by the way. If you Google this, you'll find that it doesn't actually work this way. But the analogy is, if you had a frog and you put him in a pot of water that was room temperature, he'd be perfectly comfortable. Then you turn the heat on and slowly warm the water up, and he doesn't realize it's getting warm, and all of a sudden, he's cooked. Whereas if you threw a frog in a hot pot of water, then he would react to it right away and jump out. And that's what we mean by boiling the frog. It's a slow boil, and I think that's kind of what you're describing here. Is when you first see it, it looks great. Everything is positive. They start putting new ideas into your head, and ideas you really hadn't heard of before. And they sound interesting, and they sound accurate, but simultaneously they are cutting you off from other sources of information. They tell you things like, let me ask you, did they tell you not to research Amway on the internet?
Mm-hmm. So that is my second point, actually, is the self-doubt and stealing your confidence. So, like I said, I was a very, very confident young person. I felt very confident about my future, about where I was at in life. And then all of a sudden I had so much self-doubt, and I started picking at myself. I was really conscious about, my skin, which I had never really been that self-conscious before, and my age, and that I wasn't retired at 20 years old. And you start comparing yourself to all of these people that say that they have all these things that don't really have a whole lot of proof that they have those things, and so they slowly start causing self-doubt. And I was in a relationship with somebody that was involved for 8 years at this point. And so for me, the triggers is when you're sitting in those meetings and you're sitting and you're listening to the same person that you've heard over and over again, and you hear the same story over and over again, and all of a sudden you hear something that really rubs you the wrong way, and so you start doing research. And so for me, my person was my significant other, and so I would go to him, and what he would do would basically tell me that I was stupid for even looking, that it was, the trash can of the world, and how could you even do that? And so they cause so much self-doubt in yourself, which is where the gaslighting really starts to come into play, that you are not allowed to ask questions. So I was not allowed to ask questions to my family. If my family said anything and I brought it up, I was completely shut down. And it wasn't just my boyfriend, my upline, but it was also his upline. So it was all of these people who are supposed to be my mentors who at this point had completely kind of shut me away from my family. And my family I have very, very successful parents. They're all successful in very, very different ways, and I've always looked up to them. And they always ask, do you want to live the lifestyle that your parents lived? And my parents worked very, very hard, and yes, maybe they didn't have the amount of time that they would love to have, but we had the coolest lifestyle. And so it was really hard for me to say that I wouldn't want the same lifestyle that I had growing up. And they just do so much to kind of twist what you think about, and then all of a sudden you find yourself not even realizing that subconsciously you're totally changing everything that you believe in and your outlook on life and business and finances and, jobs.
Yeah, good points. And, keep in mind that this applied to you, but it really applies, that same principle applies to every other IBO. Every single IBO is isolated away from everything. They tell you to cut the cable TV cord, and of course the reason they do that is they don't want you to get, number one, outside information. Number two, they don't want you spending the money on the cable. They want the money coming to them as much as they can get. But then they also tell you, don't listen to anybody else because, they're going to have old information, or, maybe they tried it and didn't apply themselves, so they don't really know what's going on. The internet, like you said, is like a trash can. And so they isolate every single person. And of course, there's no cross-lining either. So if it's a person that is not either above you in the line of sponsorship or somebody in your personal group, you're not supposed to talk to them about the business. In fact, you can't even talk to them hardly about anything, is the way it turns out. And so each individual is therefore isolated to themselves. It's really an amazing thing because the upline also says, now don't ever put anything negative downline. And if you get anything negative from your downline, there's certain things you can say or just, send it upline and let them take care of it. And so the end result is everybody is isolated to themselves as far as information. You're exactly right. They try to put things into your head that they sound good, especially initially. But then the more you get into it, the more you realize it's a money pit. and most people are losing money two ways, really. One is the expensive Amway products, and then the other one is the tool scam. And so, you're losing money. You're also losing time that you otherwise would have spent in another way. So it really is. It's like to me, it's like an evil genius. It's really brilliant the way they put it together, but it's also evil. I mean, it's pure evil as far as manipulating people, and I choose to use the term lying, because that's a word I learned very early in life from my parents. Don't lie, but that's really what it boils down to. Is they're not so much lying by saying something that's false. What they're doing is they're lying by leaving things out. It's a lie of omission. They don't tell you about the tool scam. They don't tell you that they're an illegal pyramid because there's little to no retail sales. And so all of those things are suppressed as far as, what the general IBOs know, as well as the general public, really, because people are still joining, right? People are still joining Amway every day, and they just don't know. And I think it's shows like this that'll help to shine a light on that and help people realize, what the MO is, modus operandi, because these things do sound very attractive in the beginning. I know I was attracted to it, so I kind of think you had the same, kind of initial experience. So anyway, what was the next thing you wanted to kind of discuss?
So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into my experience in dating my upline, because now hindsight, I feel comfortable to talk about it. I was very ashamed and very embarrassed about my behavior for a very long time, because I didn't really understand why I had acted the way that I did, and I didn't realize how bizarre of a relationship it actually was because of Amway. And I just want to, more than anything, urge people to, if they're looking at the business, not date anybody that's been in the business for a long period of time, until they decide whether they want to be in it forever or not. But when I first started dating my upline, it was very romantic. I thought it was very mature. He was so much older than me, and we went on fancy dates, and it was so fun. And then it got very weird. He was very religious, which I always respected. I grew up in a Christian family. I went to church, so I respected that. I loved going to church with him. He was no sex before marriage, no spending the night together, which was totally fine. But the majority of our time together was so consuming in the business. It was overwhelming. And I was just like, it was never me and my partner. It was always him in the business, and I was kind of the side thing. I was supposed to be groomed to be his wife at this point. So our hangout times consisted of him coming to my apartment, and I would cook for him, and he would sit and answer all of his Kate messages, and I would just sit there and stare at him. And then he would, we would read the chapter of the book that we were supposed to listen to together, and then on a lucky occasion, he would fall asleep on my couch in his full suit and tie, and then I eventually would I honestly sometimes would sleep on the floor next to him just to be close to him, and sometimes I would just go to bed and that he would randomly sneak out. And so every single thing that we did in our relationship revolved around the business. When we went out to eat, he tried to prospect every waitress. When we went to church, he tried to prospect every churchgoer. I was just like, you couldn't go anywhere without getting attacked. There was one time that he picked me up from the airport, and to hang out with me, he took me to the mall so that we could go prospect people at the mall with his roommates, and then I went and sat, I think, in a chair in a dressing room by myself while they went and prospected around the mall. Like, it was just crazy. And so I started just losing my mind a little bit. The more I tried to talk to him about things, the more I got shut down. And then I got to a point where I wasn't allowed to talk to him as my upline anymore. I had to go to his upline to try and alleviate some of the business stuff between us. But I had to be at every single function. Our relationship was a secret. So, when girls started hitting on him when he got higher up, I wasn't allowed to say anything. It was just the most bizarre thing. And so I started getting very, very depressed at this point. This is probably about 4 or 5 months into our relationship. I had moved. I had changed my job. I had done everything for the business. I was forcing myself to go out and prospect when I didn't want to. I was spending all of my money for, the product and the tools and everything. And I just started getting really sad, and I started kind of acting out. I would kind of freak out over, like text message or something, and then he would make me feel crazy and stupid, and I would eat my words, and I would just kind of bottle it up. And so this kept happening, and then the gaslighting really started happening. And so if nobody knows what gaslighting is, I didn't actually know until I went to trauma therapy. The definition of gaslighting is to manipulate somebody by psychological means into questioning their own sanity. So for me, when I was kind of being crazy, he tried to find reasons in my past from my childhood that's why something was wrong with me, and that I need to go to therapy because I need to deal with whatever happened to me as a kid. And I had never thought that anything happened to me badly as a kid. I didn't have a very traditional family life. I am the result of an affair. So I met my biological dad right around my 11th birthday, but both of my dads are in my life. I have my legal dad and my biological dad. My legal dad never shunned me. My biological dad accepted me right away. Like, I am the most blessed girl, there is as far as family and the life that I had growing up. And so I would go to therapy, and my dad actually paid for me to go to therapy because I was so depressed. And I would end up talking about my boyfriend and Amway and my uplines the entire time, and never about anything horrible that happened in my past. And so it just progressively got worse and worse, and I just started getting crazier and crazier. And then not only is my significant other treating me like I'm crazy and they won't talk to me about anything or address anything, but my entire upline starts treating me like this. And it just got really, really, really bad and really dark for me until I got dumped.
Yeah, it's a very closed in one-way communication path, isn't it? Everything comes from the top, and you're not supposed to question anything. And the second you do, there's big problems. I know when I found out about the tool scam back in 2005, I just sent a very simple email to my upline platinum and said, please take me off of standing order. I didn't say anything more than that. I didn't complain about the tool scam, didn't tell these guys what I thought about them, and I was thinking a lot, in negative terms. It was a very simple email. Please take me off of standing order tools. That's where the tools are just ordered every week automatically. That's what standing order means. And it went dark. It went silent. Before then, I was their best buddy. I live up in the Dallas area, and they're down in the Houston area. And, they would come up, I would go down there, do different things, business, social, whatever. But as soon as I did that, it was pure silence. It was incredible how they just completely cut me off. Not that I wanted to talk to them, but it was quite amazing how the way I look at it, it's almost like if you have a cancer and they're just cutting you out of the Amway body, if you will, just making sure that you don't infect any other cells in the body. And the best way to do that is just to cut you out and give you the silent treatment, essentially. And that's, I think, similar to what you experienced, except you kept trying to figure out what was going on and asking questions like, that's quite normal, I think. I know whenever I asked a question, I can still remember asking the question of, this toothpaste is like twice as expensive as what you find in the store. And the answer from the upline platinum, Jeanette LaRose, was, just use half as much. So those are the kind of answers you get back, right? It's just kind of nuts. And you realize you kind of learn over time that it doesn't really pay off to ask questions because you don't get any kind of a reasonable answer. So, I think it's also that, like you say, the gaslighting and conditioning, the discouraging the discouragement of asking questions. That's really, part and parcel to what's going on here as well. So, really good points that you're making there, from your own personal experience. Did you have something else next you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, just also, the self-doubt that they create with all of that by making you just doubt everything that you think or say, and then doubt, the own decisions that you are making. So at the time, I was really into tattoos. I just turned 20, so I had gone a couple years with getting them, and I really wanted to get a cross on my wrist, and I remember being scolded for that, and I wasn't allowed to do it because it could push people away when I'm introducing myself to them. They could not want to get in the business and judge me because I have a tattoo on my wrist. I wasn't allowed to, dye my hair any colors. I wasn't allowed to have any doubts that I wanted to have kids. I've never ever been sure of if that is going to be the right path for me. And at 20, I wasn't ready to make that decision in my first, relationship. And it's just a lot of beating up your self-confidence and your self-image without you even realizing that you're doing it. And then all of a sudden you're beating yourself up. I thought that I was stupid and I was not successful because I wasn't 21 and done, 21 and retired. How many 21-year-olds do you know that are actually retired, And these people, they're not retired. They're still working. And over time you start seeing the reality of what it is, but I wasn't allowed to question anything at all. And in the end, I ended up questioning myself to the point where I didn't even walk as tall as I used to. I would put my head down. I wouldn't make eye contact with anybody because I didn't know who I was. And I thought that was the only way. I was so depressed. It was so funny. I was so depressed, but for whatever reason, subconsciously, I had been so convinced that is the only way that I was ever going to be happy and successful, and that he was the only person that I could ever have that type of lifestyle with. That was the only person that was ever going to provide that for me. And they just totally change the way that you think about things, and you don't even realize that they're doing that to you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Krista, because, particularly for a younger person like, you were, well, you still are a younger person at this time, but when you got started, you were really young. And you really didn't have too much life experience. And so to me, all of those psychological things get magnified, and the negative impact on you as a person is magnified. My own personal story was I was approached when I was about 33. And so, I had already been to college. I was a Navy officer. I was working in a nuke plant, So for me, all of those psychological things probably didn't have as much of an impact as they had on you being a younger person without those life experiences in your past. And so now that they're really targeting the young people, all of those problems you just described are just going to get multiplied, in huge numbers amongst other people. So hopefully we can, find some of those people with this show and dissuade them from joining, and hopefully not have to go through those experiences that you had to go through. And that's, why I really appreciate you being on this show, is just to let people know how it really works and give them a warning to say, hey, this is what you're going to experience in the beginning. This is what's going to happen over time. And this is what's going to happen, to you psychologically, mentally, even physically over time. All these negative aspects. And you mentioned before about, not getting a tattoo or coloring your hair and all those other things. I do think there's some practical part of that. In fact, there's a practical part of almost everything these people say. But then when you really realize what's going on, the other part of those messages is we don't want you spending any money on anything else other than tools or Amway products. You have to pay, obviously your home mortgage or your apartment rent, electricity, those kinds of necessities. But other than those necessities, everything needs to be funneled into Amway, either the products or the tool scam. And that's another of, what they're actually doing. And that's the part that I have a big problem with, and I know I think the tattoo, I've got two sons, 27 and 30, and they both have tattoos. And I just always have thought it was a little bit weird to get a tattoo, but I think it's just a generational thing. I've kind of accepted the fact that, the current generation that's just normal. And so, in fact, one of my son's wives has some tattoos, and, it's different for me being older, being in a different generation, but for her, and my son, it's quite normal. So, I think those are some of the things going on there too. It's also a generational thing, and, our sort of acceptance of that kind of a thing. But certainly, putting a cross on your wrist is quite a bit different than, some of these people you see with the full body tattoos.
Right, and I did end up getting a small cross, but it's on my ankle instead and not on my wrist. And I totally agree with you, and I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because that leads me into my next point. Just now with hindsight, some of the things that I did learn from Amway that I have carried on with me into my adult life and my career now and being a business owner, and some of the things that they had said to me then that made sense to me while I was in it, but now that I am out and I have other experience, I see it totally differently. And so those are red flags. The first one being residual income is talked about a lot by them. They act like they don't have jobs, but really, look at how much time they're putting in to go to these meetings and to build their business and to go meet people. It's just a job, if not worse. Sometimes you're putting in more hours doing your Amway business than you are at your 9-to-5 job. And then in regards to residual income, they said that there's no way you can have a brick and mortar business and have residual income. They said it's almost nearly impossible. And I am a studio owner. My studio is very small, but the minute that transfer happened and I opened that business, before I even opened my doors, I had money coming into my bank account. So I don't have to instruct. I choose to instruct because I genuinely enjoy it and my community and what we do. And I can choose to do just the background stuff if I want to. I can also hire other people on, but that money will come in as long as I have somebody in place to do that. So them saying that it's not possible to do is just such a lie, The other thing is the information age industry versus the industrial age industry. I absolutely agree that the information age business is the, economy that's really booming right now. There's so much opportunity for growth, but they said that it's extremely hard to do anything in the information age business. And I, as a young person, and I just totally disagree. Now more than ever, we're seeing people that are, in their early teen years into their late 20s that are multimillionaires making money off of businesses that they have created on their own through the internet and using, the resources that we have available to us now. And it's so cool to meet young entrepreneurs that are actually creating and doing things on their own and creating their own success. And so they talk a lot about how everybody that has a job or is doing other things, we're all sheeple and they're the lions, and sheeple are just, following the herd. And they talk about, I forget the bird that one jumps off the cliff and all of them follow. They talk about how every human outside of Worldwide and Amway, that's how they are. And it's just not true. The people that are in Amway, they're the sheeple. They're the ones that are being played and following a wolf, dressed in sheep's clothing. It's just insane to me. And so I want people to be conscious of that, because I honestly think that seeing those red flags and hearing those things, the more I listen to the same speech over and over, is what pulled me out of it. And I truly think that me just being kind of crazy and just mentally not stable was my mind battling back and forth with what I knew to be real and true and what they were trying to feed to me.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the term is the lemmings going over the cliff. That's the one that I'm familiar with. And, it's interesting you mentioned residual income, too, because I know the group I was involved with, which was Internet Services, which is Dexter Yeager, who passed away a year or two ago, his tool scam group, and one of his downline, Don Wilson, who I think was a double diamond, and he's out of the business now too. He's doing another MLM, but they were very insistent that we not use the term residual income, whereas I've noticed just in doing research over the years, that seems to be a worldwide dream builders thing, that they use that term quite a bit, whereas the group that I was involved in, you just weren't allowed. I mean, it was very strict. You shall not use that term. So I'm guessing probably in their history they used it and got some stern warnings from Amway. That's kind of my understanding of that. Probably is how it happened. But even though they don't use the word, they still use the whole description of the lifestyle as if it was residual income. So there's different ways of getting that idea across. You can either use the exact word, or you can describe a lifestyle that implies that word. To me, they're the same thing. And certainly, the Yeager Wilson upline did give that impression that, and they did use the term retired in terms of, retiring from your job when your Amway business gets big enough, then you're quote unquote retired. And to your point, they're working harder than anybody really, because typically, when you get to the point of retirement, which is, typically emerald or diamond, somewhere in that neighborhood, depending on what your, lifestyle was before joining Amway, they have groups that are in different states, maybe even different countries that they have to travel to, which is very time consuming as well as expensive. And so, when they say residual income or, great lifestyle, and what they're really doing is just spinning plates all over the place like crazy, trying to keep all the plates spinning, and moving and keeping it together. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this in our first show, but I know my upline diamond, Bruce Anderson, I talked to him one time after he got kicked out, and he told me he was only a diamond for a year or two after he got to that level, and then he fell back to emerald, and it was only because of the tool scam money that he had a diamond lifestyle, that he could show people, say, hey, look how successful I am, with his fake diamond pin, essentially. But everybody thought that he was still a diamond because they were unaware of what was really going on. Now, my upline emerald, one of them, was an airline pilot, and he actually, quote unquote, retired, but I think it was only for a few months, maybe a year or so. It was a short period of time. He went back to flying. I think it's because his business started falling apart and he couldn't afford things. And the excuse was, well, I just enjoy flying so much, I had to get back to it. It was one of those things. So,
right.
Yeah, there's all kinds of misdirect and,
right.
flim-flam going on.
I have a similar experience with my upline and his upline. So the couple that sponsored my boyfriend, when he started blowing up, he went silver, forcing them into gold. So they were getting recognition for the gold level. Well, when he went platinum, as you guys know, when you go platinum, you break off as your own branch. And so your upline is getting a smaller percentage from your business at that point. And so they fell out of ranking completely when he went platinum, and they were so embarrassed that they quit the business. And they were out for 2 or 3 years. And then he started dating one of the Duncans and got married to her. And because their family business is so huge, he got put into her business. And his upline came back and took over his old business. And they just took over his complete platinumship.
Crazy stuff. Now, I think even when the platinums break off, I might be mistaken on this, but I think when they break off, the other couple that was gold gone to silver, but that's all they would be unless they had side volume. Is that right?
Yes. So I don't think that they had a very big business. I think that my boyfriend at the time was really their only leg. So I don't really know what happened as far as bouncing back. I just know what I was told when they weren't there anymore. So I never really asked what level they were kind of pushed back to. And with the numbers from if I remember correctly, before you're in that platinum ship, or if you have your own platinum ship, you're getting like 25%. But when you have a leg break off into their own platinum ship, I think it's like 4% or something like that. And I haven't reviewed these numbers in forever, so I could be totally off. But
no, that's the numbers I remember. Yeah, I remember the 4% residual as well.
Right.
But like you say, that's a pay reduction unless you have other legs. If you're just one-legged, as they say, if your downline platinum is your only leg, or any significant volume is coming from that one leg, then you're really just making the differential between your downline and you, and so it's much less money than having that person before they hit the 25 or the 7,500 PV level. And Peter, we left you out of this conversation. Did you have any comments or questions?
No, I'm good. I'm enjoying this. But I do have some questions for Krista. So I got to go back kind of like to some of the things you were mentioning a little bit earlier when you were in that lifestyle. It's almost like you were in a trance, like you were in your own little bubble, like you were just not even thinking straight as a result of, the way they were molding or trying to mold and manipulate you. But you also mentioned that you had, a strong family, like double dads and your mom, and sound like other family members as well. Did they know what was going on at this time and try to resist, or were you kind of hiding it, or did they, what was your family giving your feedback? Because it sounds like, you're a young gal and they want to get actively involved in your level of success, and they're all smart people. So how did your family react to this indoctrination into this cult that you were in?
My parents they're just the most amazing human beings, and they have never been overly involved in my life. They always tell me their honest opinion on things when I get involved in something, but they also allow me to fail. So it's like, I don't necessarily agree with it, but you're an adult and you're allowed to fail on your own. And so my dad, they were not about it. They're both businessmen. My dad was the CFO for a toy rocket company here in Colorado, and so he is my business go-to, my business guru. And so they're very logical and honest about it. And my mom is the type of person that has started or purchased a lot of businesses that didn't last very long. And so my mom was really excited, and she came to a meeting, and my mom was actually the first person that I sponsored. And so at the beginning, it was very 50-50 because I was so excited about it, and they were excited for me. And then as I was going through it, when I talked to them about it after the fact, they just said that I wasn't recognizable as a human. Like, nobody knew who I was. My friends, my family, nobody knew who I was anymore. I just wasn't myself. But I also wasn't helpable. Like, I was told not to listen to them, and so I would go to them. They would give me an answer that I didn't want to hear, and I would brush it off. And then when I went through my breakup, that was probably the hardest year of my life. Just mentally, I was so gone. My family didn't know how to help me, but they were there every single day supporting me. I called my dad every single day on lunch, and my mom every single day going to work. So they were always supportive. They just didn't necessarily know what to do to help me, and it wasn't until later, when I had thought that I had moved on past all this stuff, I was really crazy because I just opened a business, and I got really suicidal and just scary mentally, and my boyfriend took me, to the crisis center, and that's when my parents finally understood how bad it was, and that's when all of us finally understood that I went through mental trauma from my relationship, and that I needed therapy to access those memories and process them and deal with them so that I can move forward as an adult and stop letting this control everything and decision that I make.
So it sounded like you were, at that time, and still are, but at that time you were independent but headstrong. So they were probably like, hey, Krista, and you was like, listen, I'm doing this. And they would say, okay, you got it handled. They realized that you weren't physically being abused because you didn't show up with marks on your body, and then they'd probably say something. You'd say, whatever. You buck them a little bit. Nope, I got it handled. and they'd say, well, she's headstrong and she's positive and she's going to figure it out and there's nothing really that bad going on, and maybe surrounding yourself and just say, okay, well, let her make her mistakes. And it sounded like they were, I'm going to use the word, kind of fooled or deceived by your level of maybe confidence, that they didn't realize that you were really hurting that much until you, like, you know, trauma center is just about rock bottom. You know what I mean? Like when somebody's bringing you into the suicide trauma center, it's kind of like, holy cow, where did we miss all these signals? So was that more or less what had happened?
Yes, absolutely. They honestly haven't really fully understood until I sent them the recording of our last podcast, and all of my parents responded very, very great to it, and I think they're way more understanding of what happened now. But I don't think at the time I could put into words what was really going on. I was just feeling crazy and sad, and that's how it's coming off. So I think that they did the best they could, and it's ironic that the people that everyone in Amway told me weren't going to be there for me, they were the ones that picked up the pieces from the mess that the people from Amway and Worldwide had created.
Well, as a dad, I have a headstrong daughter, you know, and headstrong kids. And I was headstrong myself. I mean, how many things that I do that my parents probably wished I would have done differently. But my confidence was really deceptive. If you know what I mean, in your situation, it sounds like, you know, your confidence, you're a sharp kid, you know, you got a lot of stuff going on. You know, they knew the Krista who was, you know, bright and smart and all that sort of stuff. And that was somewhat deceptive. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean, it's just like, wow, I never saw it. Like, never saw it. Like, she was just, and this young man probably was charismatic and charming and a good guy, you know what I mean, and religious and all of the other types of things. And you would probably say, you know, out of all the people that she could be involved with or dating, this guy's a good guy. I mean, so double deception.
I was,
you know what I mean?
Working hard and going to church and dressing professionally, and, you know, I was doing all the right things, but I was just not mentally stable because of everything going on.
And how long was your mom involved? Did she quit before you did?
Yeah, my mom never really, she tried to sponsor like one coworker, and it's ironic, this is actually the night that Court and I started dating, was the night that we drove to go sponsor some of our coworkers, and they weren't really interested. They showed us like their telescope the whole time, and then my mom poured me for the remainder of my time until I was out, and then she was done too.
Gotcha. Yeah, because another aspect of this, Peter, is, you know, no negative downline. And so her mom is not just her mom is her downline. Right. And so, you know, the direction is don't tell your mom anything negative, any issues you're having, any struggles you're having. Just put on airs that everything is going great. And so, you know, she was taught not to communicate honestly like she otherwise probably would have. You know, from my understanding, my limited understanding of your relationship with your parents, it was good. And you probably would have been more open with them had it not been, you know, for that edict, no negative downline. Is that something you could comment on?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are exactly right. I think my mom was we never really had that like upline, downline relationship per se. But I think that I was so confused on what was going on that I didn't really know how to articulate it. So she would come over and she could clearly see that I wasn't myself, that I wasn't happy, but like they didn't really know the extent. And also my dads both lived here in Colorado at the time. My mom lived in Olympia, which was an hour and a half away from me. So I didn't really see my parents. I only talked to them on the phone throughout all of this. So I would see my mom every so often.
Wow.
Yeah, because you're in Colorado now, but you were in Oregon or Washington State back then?
Yeah, I was in Seattle at the time of being prospected and going to college up there. And because of everything that happened, I moved back to Colorado. I'm kind of like scarred. I still love to go see Washington. My sister lives there, but it's definitely a trigger for my trauma.
Yeah, I can understand that for sure.
I have another question for you, because of some of the work that you do now, you're familiar with what it's like to work with people that have mental disorders. So you would know, now we know the trauma, but because of the stuff that you've been through, but were you mental? Like, I know, man, you diagnosed yourself. Were you kind of mental, like when you were going through your, like, whatever you were going through? Like, were you the person that was like crazy, or were they driving you, or were they driving you crazy?
I think it was a mixture of both. I think they were driving me crazy, but like they were making me think that I was just the crazy one, and I was definitely doing crazy things. I, for whatever reason, was like lying about certain things, or I, for probably like 8 to 9 months, I begged my ex to come back. I would beg him and send him these long text messages, and then when he would say no, I would backlash and, you know, be like, well, screw you and all of that stuff. And so, yeah, I was definitely being erratic.
Well, that's kind of, I think that's kind of normal for women, Scott. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I was young. Well, yeah, I had never had an experience like that. Like, I had never freaked out over a boy like that before. And so everyone was like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, I don't know.
I didn't think that's right. I didn't think that's so abnormal. I've been on the receiving end of
yeah, you know, I was young. So, yeah, I was definitely crazy. But then they were also making me feel like I was crazy and I wasn't good enough, you know, to have not only my ex treating me poorly, which, you know, granted, he handled it with a lot of grace for the way that I was going. Most men would not have handled it with grace. I admire him for that. But, you know, his upline telling me that he just outgrew me and I'm not on his level anymore. And I remember the wife upline was just so enamored by him. One time I talked to her and she's like, well, it's just so hard to be around men that are just so perfect. And I was like, oh my God, I can't talk to any of you guys. So I ended up getting like a DUI, and I called my upline for help. That was a bad idea. You know, I spent 12 hours in jail. And so it was really bad for me. That's when I got really depressed. I weighed about, 80, 85 pounds. I was on antidepressants. People that met me thought I was crazy. Like I was not mentally well, and that was the first time that I had ever experienced that. Before that, I was definitely somebody that looked at depression like something that was fake, and I was just like, well, boo-hoo, get over it. But your brain is so powerful, and psychologically, you can really do some damage if you're not careful about what you're allowing to be put into your mind.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you got therapy and it helped you. That's such a great story on the back end. The front end of your story is just a totally weird deal, and I hear everything you're saying. Because even though I was married when I was in Amway, I can definitely relate to all those things, all that sort of mind gameship that goes on, and being a young single woman and that much more prone to being influenced in a very extreme way, and then you add in the romantic part of it, it just gets almost infinite as far as trying to get your arms around it. I'm just so happy that you were able to remove yourself and get therapy, and now you're just doing great. That's just such a great story on the back end. And let me ask you, I don't know if we talked about this on the first show or not. I don't recall. What was the policy from your upline as far as selling stuff to customers? Was that something that was encouraged, required, barely mentioned, and how much of that did you do?
It was encouraged as kind of like a side note. Like it was basically you're mainly supposed to do your own PV, which is your point volume, how they measure money per whatever you're buying or whatever. And so you were responsible for that. And then if you could get a little bit of extra help for products from your friends and family, great. If not, no big deal. Do your own PV, basically. In my time, I ended up sponsoring about 12 to 13 people. I did go Eagle, which is 6 people doing at least 150 PV, which I think is equivalent to about $300 to $400, depending on what you're purchasing. And so I had 6 people do that 1 month, and I believe my paycheck for that was like $20 or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean that's you were more successful than most. Most people don't even sponsor one person, or the next level up maybe sponsors 1 or 2 people. So yeah, to have 6 people and spending money like that, puts you way above average as far as results category. But it sounds like with all those people sponsored and buying things, those were other IBOs, but you didn't have too much retail sales to people outside the business, right?
Yeah, correct. My dad and my mom would often sometimes purchase for me, like if I needed to hit a goal so I could attend an event or whatever. But other than that, nobody ever really purchased it, and they didn't like the products. They just did it to support me. So, I mean, as a business owner, you can get a sales tax license for $20 and buy wholesale products that are better and cheaper and start a business and make a profit immediately, comparatively to I probably put $20,000 to $30,000 into Amway over the years and made $20 back.
And were you ever taught to take some of your own personal PV and convert it to customer PV? Was that something that Worldwide Dream Builders taught?
No, they did not teach that at all. I did see when I was looking at my team and my downline, I did see that I could actually go in and convert for my IBO. So if I wanted to hit a goal, I could just pretend and I could make a purchase and convert it over to one of my IBOs, which I thought was weird, but I never heard about the customer conversions. They didn't talk about any of that stuff to us.
Okay, because there is an Amway rule that says unless you do 50 PV in a month to customers, or you have 10 different customers, and this is every single month, then you're not supposed to get any downline volume bonus. So I wonder, did you actually get that downline volume bonus if you didn't show 50 PV of personal retail sales? I'm thinking maybe not.
Yeah, I think on occasion I did get the 50 just from my friends and family, and I know on occasion some of my downlines also got it, but I don't think I consistently hit it, but it's been so long that I don't necessarily remember the details of that stuff. I blocked a lot of it out, and I've only brought back specific memories.
Well, that's understandable. I was just trying to think of my own mind. If you had 6 people, 6 different legs, particularly, because it's different if you have 6 across, 6 people that you personally sponsored yourself versus you sponsor one and they sponsor one and they sponsor one, down in a vertical leg, if you will. That vertical leg is much less profitable than if you sponsored across. If you had sponsored
right.
6 personally and they were actually spending money, then you should have been making, I'm gonna say $300 or $400 a month. If they were, spending 150 PV, all 6 of them in a given month, if that all happened simultaneously. And I don't have the bonus chart in front of me, but I think it's somewhere in the order of $300 or $400. That's kind of the point, as I recall, where you basically your products are free, quote unquote free, because the idea is that the bonus that comes from them buying the products is enough to pay for your own personal purchases. That's what I mean by getting the products free. Of course, you're spending a whole lot of time and money on the tools, so it's not really free. It's depends how you look at it. But that's interesting. Because go ahead.
I just sponsored the 6 across, and I only hit that goal 1 month, and it was for one of those events. So it was me pushing on my downline to make sure that they hit I think it was just their minimum goal is what they had to hit. So I don't think it had anything to do with customer PV or anything along those lines, because I definitely didn't make very much. I honestly think that it was only about $20 to $30 for that one period of time.
Yeah, that sounds like that bonus got passed to your upline. That $300 or $400 that would have resulted, had you had the 50 PV or 10 customers in that month. Because I was explicitly taught to do that. I didn't realize the significance of it at the time, because at the time I was working. I had a full-time job. I had 2 boys. I had, a lot of things on my hands. And so when we were given these instructions to essentially fake out the computer, and the company's okay with this, we're talking to them, and this is all on the up and up, is what the upline said. Then you don't really think about it that much because you're so busy anyway, and you're under the understanding that they're actually helping you versus ripping you off. Then you just kind of do it. You don't even think about it that much. You just do it and don't realize, until afterwards, like I do now, the significance of that, because what they were really doing was cheating.
Right.
Fraud. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. There's no sort of light words to talk about it. It's just lying and cheating and fraud. That's really the bottom line. So incredible stuff. Peter, did you have anything more for Krista?
No, this is great information. I'm hoping that maybe she'll have some other stories to be able to tell us. But as I was listening to her story a little bit earlier, she could have been saying, this is when I was in that whatever religious cult, or this is the kind of thing that I was in when I was in a sex cult, or this is what I was in when I was in a whatever kind of a cult. It sounds like, and then we say this is the Amway cult, if you will. Is that the way you more or less felt? And the other part is, when I hear you speak about the way they treated you, you were more like a possession and an object than a person. So if you want to address any one of those issues.
Yeah, so after the whole thing and I had quit and I had walked away, because the gaslighting was so strong it was honestly, I think about 6 people that were doing it to me. It was Court, my boyfriend, or I guess at the time ex-boyfriend at that point, his upline, which was Dwee and Chuck, I don't remember their last name, and then their upline, which was like our lead team, which was Randy, Jasmine, and I can't remember his wife's name, who just recently went diamond, I think, a few years ago. But they were all doing it to me. So after the fact, I was so embarrassed. I just thought that it was me. Like, I thought that I was crazy, that something was wrong with me. And so it took me a long time to just move on with my life, and I thought that I had gotten over it. And I didn't know that it was affecting every single decision that I made for my career, relationship decisions I was basing off of all of this subconscious damage that they did. And so mentally, I thought it was me. I thought I was the problem for, up until about 2 years ago. I felt that way. And so I was so embarrassed that I never talked to anybody about it. I never sought out help or therapy because I didn't know that it was an issue. I just thought that it was me and it was my fault. So it wasn't until I started therapy and I had such an awesome therapist that told me, they were brainwashing you and what they were doing to you was wrong, and it was mental abuse, and it's a form of domestic violence, and it's not your fault. That was the first time that I was ever able to address it and kind of twist the blame on them and look at it like a cult. I started watching there's like a cult belief documentary series on Netflix or Hulu, I believe, because my therapist told me to watch it. And a lot of the things, Amway was by no means that extreme. I wasn't branded or anything crazy, but a lot of things that they do was very cult-like. And that was when I started putting 2 and 2 together. And so to this day, I still have a really, really hard time blaming them for what they did to me. I'm not angry at all. I've just kind of let it go at this point. But I think that was a huge factor as to why I didn't look at it that way and why I have a hard time talking about it like that's what it is, even though, yes, I do think that it's very cult-like and there's a lot of weird things that they do that are very similar to a lot of really popular cults, like Scientology,
There we go. Excellent.
Yeah,
okay.
It's great that you're speaking up now, Krista. I understand the initial trauma, and I think the words that you used, embarrassed and ashamed, are the 2 most common reactions that people have, even if they haven't gone through as much as you did. They're just ashamed and embarrassed because they got involved in something, whether it was, a cult-like experience, or they lost money, or they lost friends, or, whatever that loss was. They just don't like to talk about it. And that's what allows these scams to continue, is people don't speak up. So, again, thank you for speaking up. I know it took you a while to get there, and that's fine, but you're there, and you've made 2 shows with us, and, we're getting the word out. And I'm so glad you let your parents listen to the first show, too, because I think they probably have a better understanding of what you went through just in talking about those things and knowing that you're not alone. You had a normal experience. Now, you had an extraordinarily abnormal experience because of, your boyfriend and him being older and him going platinum and, wanting to marry you and all this stuff. That is extreme. But as far as just the day-to-day experiences of shutting others out, and telling people that they need to get all their information from the upline and nowhere else, those are all the typical things that go on in Amway. And it's not just Worldwide Dream Builders. It's all of the different lines of sponsorship and tool scam companies. That's a commonality that I found across the industry and in researching it the past 15 years. So thank you for coming forward, because if anyone had a reason not to come forward, it would be you, because of your extreme experience. And I just encourage other people to do like you're doing, whether it's coming on the show, going on social media. Like I always mention, go to the FTC.gov website and file a complaint. That seems to be the way the government is telling us how to get action. So I'll mention that again. But I just want to thank you. And if there was anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to cover during this call, Krista, go right ahead.
I think I went over everything. I'm just really grateful for you guys for giving me the opportunity, and Scott for you reaching out to me the first time around. I have been just kind of waiting for the opportunity to share my story in hopes that I can protect other young people from similar situations, and also to help young entrepreneurs realize that you don't need an MLM to be a successful entrepreneur, and that you can start any business that you want to, as long as you can figure out how to save your money and get a good credit score. That's all that it takes, and you can find mentorship for starting any business that you want. And so that's just my main goal, and I'm just so grateful that you guys have opened the door so that I know that I can speak about this openly, and that regardless of any backlash that may come from my upline, if they find out about me doing this stuff, that I will be able to handle it for the betterment of just, America and the people that are out there trying to find things to better their life and their financial state.
Yeah, the cool thing about
line gets back to you, let me know.
Yeah, the cool thing about knowing some people in high places is usually the upline might be a little bit overpowered. So there's there's a few things we could do, Scott, if you know what I mean, if that gets out of hand. So you're okay, Chris.
I wouldn't want them to come back on you, but if they did, please let us know, because for me that would be pure fun. I know it would be probably uncomfortable for you, but I could have a really good time with that. Because unlike you, I am still angry. I'm angry that these people have been doing this for decades before I joined and after I quit. And I'm not angry to the point of, I'm like gritting my teeth angry. I'm just saying, you're ripping off millions of people. This should not be happening, particularly in this country. We have laws and regulators and things that are supposed to be addressing these kinds of issues, and it's frustrating that they're not, but I'm going to keep plugging along. I'm going to keep bringing on guests like you, telling your story, and, we're just going to keep pushing. So I guess that's my last statement of the evening there, Peter. I'll let you make any other comments and wrap it up.
We are good to go. So, Krista, thanks for being here. Come back anytime you want if you have another version of a story or anything else you'd like to share with us. And also, if you want to share with us any of your business experiences and things like that, or stuff that you've learned along the way, all of that stuff would be certainly welcome. We love having you here as a guest. Scott, thanks for being here. Thanks for inviting Krista, and we're going to catch everybody next time on Building Fortunes Radio. Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to Building Fortunes Radio on buildingfortunesradio.com. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check us out every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for the designated Building Fortunes Radio segment with Peter Mingle. Be sure to check out the buildingfortunesradio.com website for our featured segments. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. At Building Fortunes Radio, we wish you the success you deserve and are willing to work for. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world.